Welcome to Supply Chain Partners TV and podcast, where we discuss innovative services and solutions delivered by our members at Supply Chain Partners. Our members can help you to build a high-performing business and supply chain. I'm Dr. Sharon Grant, the founder of Supply Chain Partners. I've worked within the logistics and supply chain management field for over 20 years, and I specialise in strategic supply chain performance management. Let's now introduce you to our member. With us today is Rebecca Young, the Managing Director of Personalised Freight Solutions Global. Personalised Freight Solutions Global provides international freight forwarding solutions for machinery, infrastructure and project cargo, as well as customs brokerage services, warehousing and project management. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Sharon. It's good to be here.
Today's episode is about international freight forwarding. Rebecca, you've taken on the big world of machinery, infrastructure and project cargo. What inspired you to specialise in these industry areas?
I have actually, Sharon. We started in 2017, not with a view of specialising in any particular field. My past career was in machinery and infrastructure. I was actually an account manager for Caterpillar Australia, Ritchie Brothers Auctions, companies like that in that space. And we actually used to do a lot of used machinery. So when I started Personalised Freight Solutions, it was a natural progression for me to be drawn to those types of customers. In 2018, we decided to actually split the company. So we had the main brand of Personalised Freight Solutions, and then we developed the new brand of Personalised Freight Solutions Global. And we split all of the infrastructure and machinery customers into Personalised Freight Solutions Global. And just 2 years ago, I actually sold the original brand of Personalised Freight Solutions to my then partner. So she owns 100% of that business. And now I own 100% of Personalised Freight Solutions Global. And of course, our focus is on new machinery and infrastructure projects.
Thanks, Rebecca. What are some of the greatest challenges companies face when they need to export machinery, infrastructure, or project cargo?
The biggest challenge that we find customers face when shipping machinery and infrastructure globally is actually ensuring that your freight forwarder is working on your behalf, so that they have the expertise and skills to move machinery and infrastructure. We find that these projects specialised in a sense of not typically needing a container carrier. There may be times where machinery doesn't fit in a container, and therefore we have to rely on our expertise to come up with some solutions around break bulk vessels and roll-on, roll-off carriers. The other thing that we find in this space is that where machinery and goods do fit into containers, that there is a lot of them. So we use our expertise to be working with our worldwide partners to ensure that we get bookings for a high volume of containers. Some of the other things that we find our customers really rely on us for are rules and regulations around machinery imports, in particular, the cleanliness of a machine. And this is something that can actually be an issue in export cargo as well, because if we're exporting a machine from, say, Brisbane to New Zealand, New Zealand's quarantine is just as strict as Australia's quarantine. So we need to make sure that we're advising our customers around cleanliness of machinery, around other countries' rules and regulations. I know we were specifically talking about export cargo, but in terms of import cargo, we give a lot of advice around tariff concessions and ways our customers can minimise duty requirements as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. Let's now talk about determining the best mode of transportation. If a client needs to export machinery, infrastructure, or project cargo, how are decisions made about sea freight, air freight, and land freight?
That's where your expert freight forwarder comes into the equation. An exporter or an importer should be able to rely on their international freight forwarder to assist them in making those decisions. We really see when it comes to project cargo that what we mean by project cargo is cargo that's coming in for an entire project. So that's going to be all different shapes and sizes. So specifically speaking to Personalised Freight Solutions Global, when we sit down with a customer to have a look at their specific project needs, we're making decisions or giving advice around multiple modes of transport. Firstly, will it fit in a container? Not everything is going to fit in a shipping container. So therefore, once we determine, yes, it can fit in a shipping container, we will go and execute that mode of transport. However, if it can't, we need to then look for a solution around either break bulk vessel or a roll-on, roll-off vessel. And that's going to be determined by where the cargo is coming from and where it's going to, because those vessels don't exist on every trade lane. But as I said, a lot of these projects rely on multiple modes of transport where there's parts to be shipped. This may be that we need to do the parts via air freight, or that a particular time frame on a project might be getting a little tight and we have to utilize air freight in the supply chain so that the project is being executed on time. We do also like to look at budget. Budget with a project is incredibly important, and we have best laid plans that we will execute a project in a certain way through containerized cargo, roll on, roll off cargo. Then all of a sudden something becomes more urgent and we need to utilize the likes of air freight. When we look at land transport, for example, if a piece of cargo is coming out of North Queensland and there's not those modes of transport that are readily available straight out of, say, Cairns, for example, we may choose to look at either trucking the piece of cargo down to Brisbane, or if, again, it can be containerized, we utilize rail in that scenario.
Thanks, Rebecca. I can see why it's important to get expert help from a freight forwarding specialist when determining the best mode of transport. I'm keen to learn how Personalised Freight Solutions Global has helped its clients with freight forwarding challenges when exporting machinery, infrastructure, or project cargo. Could you please provide one or two real-life client examples?
Absolutely. Recently, we've completed an export job whereby the customer purchased a lot of recycling machinery out of a factory in the Gold Coast. That factory didn't actually have any capabilities of packing containers. So we assessed the sizes of the cargo and determined how many containers that we would be able to put this cargo into. We then arranged for a project manager for this customer, and that project manager brought together a team of labour, the trucks and the cranes, and was on site to assist in the disassembly of the machinery to be packed into the containers, the labour to lash all of the machinery down in the containers, and ensuring that our trucking company was on time in collecting containers and moving them in and out of the customer's supplier's yard. From there, the project manager then arranged for those containers to be booked on vessels to go to New Zealand. And then once in New Zealand, we arranged for our overseas office there in Auckland to be on site to meet the containers. We also arranged for a New Zealand quarantine company to meet the containers on site so that the containers could be unpacked on the customer's site. So in New Zealand, you cannot just unpack containers without having quarantine approval. Now, the best way to do that is to get an annual approval on your site. However, where a site is being newly set up and not necessarily relying on import containers for their business, this is a one-off transaction that we're doing. We actually organise for a consultancy company to go down and supervise the unpack of the containers so that quarantine in New Zealand are satisfied. So that's one example of how from start to finish, PFS Global has helped the customer execute their project on time and on budget. The other example I'd like to give is actually in regards to our import service. So we assist a global manufacturer who's actually based over in Northern Ireland to assist their customers that are purchasing from them here in Australia to buy their goods, ship it and import it into the country. These are large screening and washing plants that are very complex in approach when it comes to customs clearance. PFS Global assess those plants ahead of time. We generally assess them around 6 months before they're actually shipped to ensure that we can give some advice to the customer in regards to the duties, their customs taxes they'll be paying. Once we establish a transport plan for the shipments, we then advise the customer to lodge a tariff application with Australian Customs on the basis of the research that myself and my customs brokers have already completed. And we lodge that tariff application ahead of time so that customs can assess the importation and give clearance prior to clearance that we're allowed to use the tariff concessions that we've found for the customer. This gives the customer a bit of certainty around if there is tariff concessions being used, that we're allowed to use them, and the duties that may be applicable to the shipment, they know ahead of time for their cash flow purposes how much they're going to need to pay customs on importation. And then we execute the actual shipping of the goods and ensure that they're moved from the factory in Northern Ireland right through to the customer's site. Again, there's an element of project management in this regard because they shipped out of multiple countries at times over multiple vessels. So our project manager will actually meet those containers on site and ensure that they're being offloaded as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Rebecca. They are excellent examples. What would be a key lesson you have learned that could help your future clients?
I think the key lesson in regards to export and import is preparation. It's finding out the information ahead of time specific to your needs. We always recommend that any potential client or any client of ours gives us a call and chats to one of our account managers ahead of time to discuss with them what they're planning to do. We always recommend also in that discussion establishing a comprehensive quote. Nobody likes bill shock at the end of a shipment. So by simply informing your international freight forwarder of your plans and what you plan on doing and establishing a comprehensive costing to what you're planning on doing will ensure a nice, smooth delivery with all costs in check ahead of time.
Thanks, Rebecca. Let's now talk a bit more in depth about your international freight solutions for machinery, infrastructure, and project cargo. Could you please explain how you facilitate the movement of goods by sea, air, and land?
Absolutely. So our services primarily exist of sea freight, air freight, and land transport. So land transport is an extension of the first two modes of transport. Our sea freight options can be anywhere between 1 container through to 100 containers per shipment. This can be full containers, otherwise known as FCL, less than container load, otherwise known as LCL. We could have roll-on, roll-off vessels, which we say is ro-ro cargo, or we could have break bulk cargo, which is where the actual vessel lifts the cargo on and off the deck of the vessel with its own crane, so self-lifting. In terms of air freight, before COVID, 90% of all air freight actually travelled on passenger airlines. With air freight, not all cargo is suitable for commercial airlines. Sometimes it is slightly bigger air freight and it is more suitable for a freighter or a charter service. PFS Global will give an option in terms of air freight, whether it is suitable size for a commercial flight or whether it is suitable for a charter or a freighter airline. In terms of air freight, we also offer an international parcel service, and we offer this service for customers for documentation for when our customers are traveling and we are able to actually move their baggage around the world through international parcel freight. We also do a lot of part shipments through air freight because they're able to be moved from one location to another very quickly. And as I said earlier, land transport is an extension of both of these modes of transport, both at origin and at destination. And we'll make those decisions on behalf of the customer with their best needs in mind. So it may be that a customer doesn't have enough room to use a side loader, which is where a container is dropped on the ground, but they have a loading dock. So we'll use a typical flatbed trailer. There may also be a requirement of a tilt tray, and we would also offer taut liner services for where we've unpacked a container and the customer requires delivery of the loose cargo.
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate that shipping freight internationally can be overwhelming and time consuming for businesses. What types of essential information do your clients need to ship freight internationally?
Sure. We offer a lot of information on our website. You'll be able to find there a guide for importation. We also provide a really transparent list in regards to our services called the shipment process. And that basically gives the user of our services some insight on what they can expect from using our international freight forwarding service. We always tell our customers this is a starting point of a conversation. So we don't like to tell our customers how to do things. We like to understand how they need things done and establish a process around it. But you don't know what you don't know. So we give them a starting point, and that often opens up a conversation for them to let us know how they need things done. Then there's the customs authority paperwork that a customer is required to give to a customs broker to act on their behalf. We also provide insight into Incoterms. So Incoterms is essentially who pays for what in the international buying process. And this really helps either first time international purchasers develop with their suppliers. Well, if I buy this, say on FOB terms, what am I paying for and what are they paying for? So our Incoterm guide will be able to give a really quick snapshot of what that means for an international purchaser. We also have on our website, and something that we know is of great value to people, is acceptable documentation for quarantine. So if you're shipping sea freight, for example, you'll always need a packing declaration for quarantine. And at times, if you don't have the right paperwork, it can end up costing you money. And potentially, more importantly for customers, it costs them time in delays because quarantine need to do extra processing when it comes to your shipment if you don't have the right paperwork in place. And of course, then there's the general stuff like standard trading terms and conditions that a customer should be aware of. Our terms and conditions are pretty standard for our industry. And I would always advise anybody engaging with an international freight forwarder to give those terms and conditions a little read, because quite often it negates a international freight forwarder of everything, and an international freight forwarder should hold appropriate insurances such as a freight forwarder's liability insurance. This is similar to not a liability insurance, but a professional indemnity insurance. So the advice that I give my customers are covered.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm sure that your clients really appreciate your expert help in these processes. What are the next steps a client should take if they would like to use your international freight forwarding services?
Of course, I would welcome everybody to use our international freight forwarding services. We have lots of ways to get in touch with us in regards to simply maybe taking one of our free freight health checks. We never want to fix something that's not broken. So we always ask potential customers to give us a look at what they're currently doing. And if we can add value to that process and to make things easier for a potential customer, we always will. So the free health check process allows us to have a look at it, make some recommendations, and then from there we can have further discussions on how we can add value to your business. We're available on www.pfsglobal.com.au, and there we have a quote now button. So we gather a lot of information there, and one of my freight consultants will be able to get back to anybody within 24 hours. Quite often my freight consultants are sitting online late at night because of needing to deal with different time zones. So quite often, if you submit a quote inquiry through our website, you'll get a little, hey, thanks so much, we'll get back to you tomorrow on this. At times, my guys will actually push out a quote at 9 o'clock at night. They're very committed to our customers and understanding what our customers need in terms of their purchasing choices. We understand that some of our customers are dealing with Europe, with the UK, with the USA, and they want quick answers so that they can determine whether they will purchase a machine or not overnight. I'm not saying that that's going to be every time, but we do have a service standard that within 24 hours you will get a response from us. Also on our website, we have a WhatsApp option that will go directly to one of our team members. And of course, all of our key contacts. There's myself, there's Justin, our operations manager, and Kimberly, our business manager. One of us will always make sure that your inquiry is handled quickly.
That's excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca, for joining us today from Personalised Freight Solutions Global.
Thanks so much, Sharon, for having me and letting me explain the services that my business offers and a little bit of insight for your viewers in regards to what makes a really good international freight forwarding relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes today's episode on international freight forwarding with Personalised Freight Solutions Global. You will find all of their contact details listed below. So join us again at Supply Chain Partners TV and podcast, where we meet with experts to discuss key business and supply chain issues, topics and trends, including logistics, supply chain management, technology, and much more. Be sure to click the subscribe button to this Supply Chain Partners channel. We look forward to you joining us again in a future episode.